Hello, buddy. Welcome back to Tim Man's Core channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tim Man Taylor, and today I'm reacting to my second Midnight Tales video for you guys. And this was for Disturbed But True February horror stories. So without further ado, I'm going to turn these lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction on the road into the back. Okay, here we go.
There's a hiking trail near my school that goes up about 2 miles to a ridge with a beautiful view of the entire valley.
Okay.
It's one of those spots where, if you time it right, you can catch the sunset and watch the sky shift into layers of gold, purple, and deep blue.
I ain't gonna lie, but that sounds like a cool sight to look at. Almost like another Northern Lights experience, but it don't move around in the sky like they do, in other words.
A great way to clear your head, but also not the kind of place you want to be stuck after dark. One Saturday evening, a few friends and I decided to make the hike. We got to the top without any issues, took in the view for a bit, and then realized we had terrible timing. The sun was already starting to set by the time we began the 2 mile descent. Not ideal, but we knew the trail well enough. At first, it was just eerie. The kind of unsettling feeling you get when you're deep in the woods, and the light is slipping away faster than you expected. The wind rustled through the trees, the path darkened by the minute, and every little sound felt amplified. I was already on edge because I'm a pretty paranoid person in general, but I kept quiet and focused on getting back down. Then, out of nowhere, my friend stopped abruptly. "What's that?" I squinted in the direction he was looking, but my eyesight isn't great, and I didn't see anything at first. Then my other friend, who was a guy, spoke, his voice low and uneasy. "It's a girl." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. We were in the middle of the woods at night. There wasn't a single other person on the trail when we came up.
First, I'll be like them trying to get down a certain hill quicker when darkness falls because I do not want to be stuck in the woods getting lost. But also, seeing a girl on the trail when you did not see anybody else up there, that is not only creepy but spooky. I don't know why a girl will be up there in the woods when it's getting close to dark, unless she's a ghost or maybe a accomplice to somebody. But I don't know. I don't want to jump into no conclusions. Let's just keep on going.
And now, somehow, there was just a girl. As we got closer, I finally saw her. She was sitting on the ground in a pile of leaves, knees pulled tightly to her chest, rocking back and forth. Her head was tilted downward, and she was wearing nothing but a thin pink nightgown. It was February. Everything about it was wrong. At first, my friends and I thought maybe she was just on a really bad trip. It wouldn't be the first time we'd seen someone in rough shape in the woods. One of our own friends had ended up in a similar state before. We debated whether or not to ask if she needed help. But then, one of my friends grabbed my arm. "She's holding a knife." I froze. Sure enough, cradled in her lap, barely visible in the dim light, was a long, glinting blade. I turned to my friends, trying to play it cool but internally losing my shit. We didn't run, didn't scream. We just picked up the pace and kept walking, throwing nervous glances behind us. Still trying to rationalize it, we started joking with each other, saying things like, "Man, that's got to be the worst trip ever."
Maybe, but if she got a knife in her hand, she's planning on killing somebody. So you either speed walk out of there and don't look back, or you hear her coming up right behind you. That's when you start running.
Just to calm ourselves down. But inside, none of us were laughing. And then we saw him. A man came sprinting up the trail, moving frantically like he was searching for something or someone. His clothes were slightly disheveled, his expression wild with panic. When he reached us, he barely took a second to catch his breath before blurting out, "Have you seen my daughter?" His daughter. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something wasn't adding up. The girl we saw was at least 20, not a child. And the way she was dressed, the way she was acting, the knife, something about the whole situation felt wrong. Without thinking, we all shook our heads. No, sorry, we haven't seen anyone. We kept walking, faster this time. The second we were far enough away, we booked it. We ran the rest of the way down, our hearts pounding, the shadows stretching longer with every step. When we finally reached the parking area, we realized something else. There wasn't a single other car parked there. No car meant no way for the man to have driven there, which meant either he had been out there for a long time or he had been waiting for someone. We didn't stick around to figure it out. We called the police and reported what we had seen, describing the girl, the knife, and the man asking about his daughter. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but we never heard anything after that. No updates, no news, nothing. To this day, I have no idea what was going on in those woods that night. And honestly, I don't think I want to know.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to know either, but I'm thinking he's probably not her dad. He probably kidnapped her and that girl was hiding in the woods from him. And if he came closer to her, she got a knife to defend herself. Or she really was on anxiety medication and she kind of started feeling bad or something. I don't know. But that is a strange case.
It was my second year of college when this happened. And even though it's been a while, I still think about it every time someone asks me for a ride. I was 20 years old, living in a college town where crime was mostly just petty theft and the occasional sketchy encounter. The apartment complex my friends lived in had a reputation for parties, break-ins, and people getting their stuff stolen if they weren't careful. It was February, freezing cold, and I was bored out of my mind at home. Instead of sitting around doing nothing, I figured I'd head over to my friend's place and be bored with them instead. It was late, but that didn't really matter. We were the type to stay up until at least 3 a.m. I got in my car and made the short drive to their apartment. As I pulled into the lot and parked, I noticed a guy walking toward me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with purpose. He was also a complete stranger. Immediately, I looked away and picked up my pace, heading toward my friend's door. My instincts told me to just get inside and lock the door behind me. Before I could make it, I heard him call out, "Hey man, can I ask you something?" I hesitated. He kept talking. I was wondering if I could get a ride back to my house. I don't have a car and no one's picking me up. I've been asking around, but nobody wants to give me a ride. I live pretty far, and it's cold as hell out here. Now, growing up in a city where you had to be street smart, I knew better than to trust random strangers, especially at night. I knew that giving a random person a ride was a bad idea, but for some reason, I let my guard down. Maybe it was the way he said it, like he was genuinely desperate. Maybe it was the fact that it was freezing outside, and I'd feel like an asshole just leaving him there.
I would feel the same way because if somebody really needs a ride badly, I would take him somewhere. But if he acts funny to where he might rob you or something, no, I ain't taking him.
To calm my nerves, I cracked a joke. "Man, you know white people don't give rides to us." He laughed, and for a second, I felt okay about it. I told him to hop in. As we started driving, he kept thanking me over and over again. "Man, I appreciate this. Seriously, nobody else would help me out." I waved it off, telling him it wasn't a big deal. Everything felt fine at first. That was until I realized he was directing me to a part of town I actively avoided. I didn't know much about that area, only that it had a reputation for being rough. As I turned onto one of the streets, the potholes got bigger, the streetlights fewer, and my nerves shot up. Then he asked, "Hey, can I use your phone real quick?" He said he needed to call his friend to make sure someone was home to open the door. I hesitated, but handed it over. He called once. No answer. Then he turned to me and said, "Hey, you should slow down. There might be police around here." I nodded, but kept driving at a normal speed. I didn't think much of it. Maybe he just didn't want me speeding in a bad area. Then he tried calling again. Still no answer. And then he said it again. "Hey man, for real, slow down. Cops are around here." That's when it hit me. Why was he so worried about cops? Why was he telling me to slow down? Was he carrying something he didn't want to get caught with?
I was thinking the same thing because if he kept on saying, slow down, there's cops in the area, he probably has weed or some other type of drugs on him. And he want to get caught with them.
Was he a wanted guy trying to avoid attention? At that moment, every worst case scenario started running through my head. I suddenly felt like I had made a huge mistake. I was driving a complete stranger to a place I didn't know, at night, in an area with no cops nearby to help me. And now he was using my phone, which made me wonder if he was secretly signaling someone that he was almost home. There were too many stories of people being set up this exact same way. Someone asks for a ride, they direct you to a sketchy area, and when you get there, bam, they have people waiting to ambush you. My grip tightened on the wheel. For a split second, I considered speeding up on purpose to get pulled over. I figured if I got stopped by a cop, at least I wouldn't be alone with him anymore. But if he had something illegal on him, I didn't want to get involved with that either. Instead, I kept my cool and drove exactly how I normally would. Finally, we pulled up in front of his house. My heart was pounding. My eyes scanned the area looking for movement, anyone waiting outside, anything suspicious. I didn't see anyone. He turned to me, thanked me for the 100th time, and got out. I gave him a quick wave, barely waiting for him to shut the door before I took off. I didn't breathe properly until I was at least 5 blocks away. The entire ride home, my hands were tight around the wheel, and my mind was racing. Who was that guy? Why was he so concerned about police? Was I overreacting, or had I just narrowly avoided something really bad? I'll never know. But one thing I do know, I'll never give a random person a ride at night again.
Hey, I wouldn't judge you for that either. I'd be scared to pick up anybody that had drugs on them. Here's some advice for all of you. Don't pick any strange people at night, like he said, because you never know what intentions they have.
This all happened back in February, when I was doing what I always did 3 days a week, waiting at the train station around 2:30 in the afternoon, about to head home from university. I commute 45 minutes each way between the city and my suburban town, and while the routine could get tiring, it had never been particularly eventful. That day was cold, and after climbing 50-something steps to get to the platform, I leaned against a freestanding advertisement to catch my breath. There weren't many people around, just one bigger guy, maybe a few years older than me, standing nearby in a long black peacoat and dark pants. He was just another commuter, until he suddenly slammed his arm into the billboard beside me. I instinctively turned to look, startled, and immediately he muttered a quiet, "Sorry," in a light, almost unsettling voice, a voice that didn't match his size at all. The whole thing seemed off, almost like he had done it on purpose to get my attention. It didn't make sense. It looked awkward, unnecessary, and way too exaggerated to be an accident. Before I could fully process it, he started making conversation. Now, I try to be open-minded with strangers. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt before making assumptions about them. But something about this guy just didn't sit right with me. Still, the train arrived within minutes, and like everyone else, we piled onto the crowded car. There weren't any seats available for both of us, so I sat next to someone else, while he sat directly behind me. I didn't think much of it. until I noticed him peering over the seat, watching my phone screen. At first, I ignored it and just focused on my game. But when we got to the last stop and the train emptied out, he stayed where he was. As I got up to leave, he finally spoke. Candy Crush? I turned and gave him a polite smile, telling him how addicted I was to it before making my way toward the exit. The conversation seemed normal enough until he casually dropped something that made my stomach twist.
I would have been like, well, if you want to play the game too, you could have got it on your phone, just to make it seem like I don't want him looking on my phone. But that is strange.
So I see you go to school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I always see you at the station in the morning and afternoon. I stopped mid-step. I hadn't told him that. I hadn't even mentioned that I was a student. Sure, I had a backpack and casual clothes, but that could have meant anything. He wasn't just guessing. He had been watching me. Still, I brushed it off and kept things lighthearted. Yeah, I do. I figured maybe he just happened to notice me around, and it wasn't that weird. Right? Then we reached the parking lot. I expected to part ways, so I smiled and said, "Well, this is me. Nice meeting you." Then he smiled and replied, "Wait, I parked there too." And sure enough, his car was right next to mine. The lot was huge. What were the odds? His car was an old red Monte Carlo, and as I fumbled for my keys, he bragged about it, going on and on about how great it was. I pretended to be interested, said goodbye, and quickly got into my car. That Friday, I saw him again on the train ride home. This time, I didn't avoid sitting next to him, figuring maybe I'd be able to decide if I was just being paranoid. Nope. The entire conversation was forced. He talked way too much about himself, trying hard to impress me. How he played blues guitar at parties, which didn't sound like much of a party, to be honest. How he worked at McDonald's, which he also weirdly bragged about.
Oh man, some stalkers are idiots. Because if you're giving off information like that, take that to authorities, see if they can get you arrested at one of these places.
It was painfully awkward, and the eye contact was unnerving. He'd just stare at me even when I'd look away. By the time we got off the train, I was ready to bolt. But once again, as I reached my car, I saw his car was parked next to mine. It was too much of a coincidence now. As we stood by our cars, he finally asked the inevitable question, "Can I get your number?" I didn't want to flat out reject him, so I offered Facebook instead. My plan was that he'd add me, see that I was in a 5-year relationship, and back off. He seemed a little disappointed, but agreed. That weekend, I thought a lot about how much I didn't like being around this guy. After talking to my friends, I decided I'd avoid him from now on. Monday came, and I made a point to arrive at the station early so I could stand farther down the platform and avoid running into him. No sign of him. But just as I let my guard down, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was. I gave him a quick nod and immediately boarded the train, making sure to sit somewhere he couldn't follow. Thankfully, we got split by the conductor. But then, my phone buzzed. A message. From him. "Sorry, got caught up with the conductor," I responded vaguely. "No problem. I just wanted to listen to music by myself today anyway." That should have been a clear enough hint. It wasn't. By now, I was genuinely freaked out. When we arrived at our stop, I called my boyfriend just to look busy and to have someone on the line in case anything happened. As I made my way through the parking lot, I took weird, inconvenient paths, weaving between rows of cars, trying to shake him off. But he followed me. No matter which way I turned, he stayed on my tail. At one point, I deliberately dropped the word babe into my phone conversation, hoping he'd hear and back off. He didn't. I sped walked to my car, and, thankfully, this time he wasn't parked next to me. I jumped in, locked the doors, and got the hell out of there. I avoided him for another 2 weeks. Finally, when he saw me at the station again, he approached, waved at me, and asked, Where have you been? It's been 2 weeks. Like he was keeping track. I took a deep breath and told him straight up, I realized I prefer to be by myself at the station just listening to music. I'm sorry. His entire face changed. His expression turned cold, and he scowled like I had just personally insulted him. Okay, he snapped, then turned and walked off. I felt relieved. I thought it was over. But then, on my drive home that day, something made my heart stop. I saw an old red Monte Carlo, his car, speeding down the opposite road. His town was in the other direction. He had no reason to be there. Was he following me? Had he been trying to figure out where I lived? I never saw him up close again, but every now and then, I'd catch him lingering near the top of the train station stairs, his eyes following me as I passed. He hasn't spoken to me since.
Hmm. Well, I think he probably thought that she was cute and beautiful, and he was trying to hit it out with her, but he got the hint that she don't want to talk to him anymore, but he just can't take no for an answer. Man, her and her boyfriend needs to go make a report to not only campus to like be on the lookout for this guy and in his car, and also get the police involved and be like, issue a restraining order against that guy. Then they'll teach him not to mess with you no more.
Back in February, my partner and I were outside working in the yard when we noticed a man who looked homeless walking up and down our street. We watched him for a while, but didn't think much of it. The next day, he showed up again. This time, he walked straight up my driveway and sat down on my porch like he belonged there. When we asked him what he was doing, he smiled and said, I'm going to fix this place up real nice, get myself a dog, plant some flowers out front. I stared at him, trying to make sense of what he just said. You're what? He sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. I live here now, he said. I have the papers to prove it. Then, as if that settled everything, he handed us a piece of paper. It wasn't a lease. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't anything that even remotely gave him permission to be on my property. It was a change of address form from the State Housing Authority. He had literally just changed his mailing address to my house. I had never met this man in my life. Neither had my partner. We told him to leave. He refused. We told him again, and he got annoyed, saying something about how he was allowed to be here, and I needed to stop making a scene. That's when I pulled out my phone and told him if he didn't leave, I'd be calling the cops. He finally got up and walked off, muttering to himself the whole way. I spent the rest of the day calling the housing agency, trying to figure out how the hell this even happened.
Yeah, because that's kind of strange that a homeless man would be able to do that. Thinking that he can say that, yeah, he lives there now, and there's people still living there.
They had no answers. A week passed, and we didn't see him again. Then one afternoon, I went outside to check my mail, and there he was, waiting by my mailbox. Every few minutes, he'd open the mailbox, check inside, close it, and wait. When I walked up, he barely glanced at me. Leave me alone. This doesn't concern you. I tensed. This is my house, my mailbox. He waved me off. I'm just waiting for my check, then I'll go home. And then, he pointed at my house. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. The second he realized what I was doing, he took off, cursing at me the whole way. When the cops arrived, they asked if he was currently on my property. I told them no. They shrugged. Call us when he is. I also put a hold on my mail that day because I didn't know if he had already been stealing it. A few weeks went by, and strange things started happening. My trash cans were taken to the curb and brought back. My weeds were pulled. My lawn furniture was rearranged. At first, I thought maybe my partner was doing it, but then threatening notes started appearing on my door. Every time I called the cops, they acted less and less interested. One officer even asked, "Can you prove he doesn't live here? This sounds like a domestic dispute." I was losing my mind. Then one night, after a month of this insanity, My partner and I came home from a late dinner with friends. The second we walked inside, we smelled shampoo. Then we heard it. The shower was running. Then, a voice. Someone was talking to themselves inside my house. We turned right around, walked out the door, got in the car, and parked at the end of the street while we called 911. The cops arrived fast. They weren't playing around. Megaphones, flashlights, guns drawn. Come out with your hands up. No response. So, they charged in. They dragged him out of the shower. He fought them, screaming, kicking, cursing, demanding to know why they were in his house. They weren't having it. After a struggle, they pulled him, still dripping wet, into the hallway. They told him to put on shoes, and when he didn't have any, they grabbed a pair of my partner's shoes from by the front door and forced him to wear them. Then they hauled him outside. Once the paperwork was done, we were finally allowed back inside. The place was a wreck. Every single window was smashed. The leftovers in the fridge were gone. My bed was messed up. He had been sleeping in it. My dresser was emptied. He had put his own things inside instead. The worst part? The urn containing my dog's ashes had been broken open and spread all over my bedroom and bathroom. I had just lost my dog a few months before, and now, this. Maybe that's why he was taking a shower. He also used up an entire bottle of my expensive skincare serum and nearly a full bottle of shampoo. But the towels he used? He folded them neatly and hung them back on the rack. At least he didn't hurt my cats. He's currently in jail on 3 charges: breaking and entering, assaulting an officer, and destruction of property. His trial is next week. I've been in touch with the DA and the arresting officers, and they've spoken to him. He's pissed. Not because he got caught, not because he's in jail, but because he's worried no one is watching his house while he's locked up. And of course, I'm still getting his mail.
I mean, really? He's a homeless dude, and he still thinks that's his house. But yeah, that guy is insane. I mean, that guy needs to get a mental evaluation as well. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications for more Midnight Tales videos like this. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I said that's a wrap, and have a nice day, y'all.